The wind pressed its mouth to the microphone and screamed. And a voice on the terminal channel, steady, unfamiliar, somehow already mine, said my name like it was a cleat. Sam, do not cast off. Hold the bowspring on slip 2. Vehicles offload only. Bring walk-ups to gate C. We've got warmers, nebulizers, and charging standing by. I'm Samir Rahman, but everyone on the dock calls me Sam. I'm 30, a Washington State Ferry's deckhand out of Colman Dock, Pier 52, downtown Seattle, the elbow where the city keeps its breath. My job is ropes and rules and the kind of timing that makes strangers think boats are simple. I wear a headset that smells like winter and a coat that remembers every squall since high school. On windstorm nights, the sound stops pretending to be flat. It has shoulders and a mood. We listen. We don't argue. Copy, gate C, I answered. The boat jumping against the H-bits like it wanted to remember how to run. Holding springs. No departure. Thank you, Sam, the voice said, and my chest did a small, unhelpful thing. This is Evan with Public Health posted at Colman. We'll stage triage at door A and keep gate C for walk-ups. Anemometers flirting with 55 knots on the North Pier. Do not fight the lines. I'll keep the room breathing. He said, do not like a gift. He said your name like a seatbelt. On the car deck, a line of brake lights exhaled impatience. The bosun, Jules, pointed at the bowspring. I felt the line through my gloves, the way a good line vibrates when the sea is trying to write in it. We're good, I told him, and he nodded because on nights like this, every sentence is alone. Ladies and gentlemen, the mate announced through the PA that makes our voices sound like we're calling from 1973. We're holding for wind. Vehicles will offload only. Walk-ups, please follow crew instructions to gate C for shelter. Thank you for your patience. People did what people do. Stared at the rail, checked their phones for weather apps that had already surrendered, asked me questions I could only answer with gestures and good eyes. A woman in a Woolrich coat held a cat carrier like a treasure chest. A kid in a Kraken beanie narrated each gust like it was a boss fight. A man with a portable oxygen concentrator patted it like you pat an old dog before a thunderstorm. Don't worry, I told him, stealing the cadence from a nurse I once loved for 3 months and a summer. Door A has power. Gate C has hands. But the truly shocking part hadn't happened yet, I could tell, because the wind was writing its own checklist and hadn't reached the line where it gets personal. We got the vehicles out. Slow, grateful, slip-slide over the transfer span that hummed like stress. Mariners say hold fast like an order and a prayer at once. We meant it literally. The altimeter on my wrist buzzed for no reason, except it was a nervous watch built by a nervous person. I guided the last box truck off with 2 fingers and a whistle, and then put my hands on the bow chock like it needed reassurance. The engineer poked his head up from the ladder and said, "We're burning genset 2 heavier than I like," which in engine language means, "Please convince the world to relax." I nodded as if I had that power. Sam, wind shift in 60. It was Evan again. Gusts to 60 from the south-southwest. Expect a snapback on the stern line. Please, please do not stand in the bight. We'll keep gate C flowing. I've got albuterol hot, spacers clean, and tea for crew if you can peel for 60 seconds. He knew our words. He knew our tricks. He'd said bight like a person who'd been on a deck before. I pictured him at a folding table under door A, badge on a lanyard, hands doing that thing calm hands do when the room wants to argue. The stern line snapped the way a whip tells the world the past isn't over. It didn't part, the splice held, but it loaded, then spoke. I flinched in a way I won't admit in a room full of people with hats. We're good, I told Jules again. He mouthed liar and grinned. We opened the passenger gate. Walk-ups flowed down the ramp, heads down, bags clutched. I went first, radio up, the ramp bucking like a horse that had been taught manners and forgot. At the bottom, the wind tried to turn me into a kite. The terminal doors breathed open, and a rectangle of fluorescent light cut the storm into a manageable problem. Welcome to Gate C, said a teen in a volunteer vest whose Whataburger visor made no geographic sense and somehow comforted me. Phones left for charging, T-right, door A for breathing. A whiteboard said, take 2 sips, then talk in a handwriting that looked like a kind person's. That's when I saw him. Evan wasn't taller than the night. He was exactly tall enough. Latino like my aunties would call him Mijo even if he's older than me. Brown curls caught in a storm-honest mess. King County Public Health patch on a soft shell. Badge that read Morales. He had hands that counted respirations without making the counting into a performance, and eyes that could ask, "You okay?" from across a crowded room and get an answer. "Sam?" he said, and my name did that seatbelt thing inside me again. Evan. I was surprised at how much I'd been expecting his face. which is not a thing I'm proud of under a storm warning. Walk-ups to door A if they're wheezy or cold, gate C for the rest. Nebs are hot. CPAP gets circuit A, we're charging on B. If B lies, we build a cathedral on C. Miss, you look cold. Can I borrow your hands for 10 seconds of warm water? Sir, is that portable oxygen behaving? Good. We'll plug you in here with the quiet outlet that isn't sure it's an outlet. He spoke in small mercies. He turned rooms into rooms. He saw me looking, and he stepped closer like the space between us had applied to be smaller. You okay? He asked. And because we were inside and not on the deck and door A had learned to be a doctrine, I said what I'd already decided I say to him. I keep being. Me too, he answered. And the wind outside remembered it had somewhere else to yell. But wait. Don't miss this next bit. The lights did that small soft dip that makes a room reach for its throat, and a generator in the ceiling cleared its voice to lie to us. Phone's off unless you're calling home, Evan told the crowd without getting louder. CPAP on A, Nebs on C. Sam, do you have an inverter in any of that fairy magic? 2, I said, and a splitter I only introduce to people I like. Introduce us, he said. We ran 2 cords back to the boat like a handshake between professions. We bought 20 minutes of breath while maintenance rolled a diesel cart through a door that did not want to be a door for diesel. When the ventilation came back like an apology, 4 people cried without making noise, and a kid quietly announced, Kevin's at 83% to no one in particular and everybody at once. Kevin? Evan said, crouching at kid level, because apparently he cares about names like I do. My inhaler, the kid said solemnly. Excellent, said Evan. Kevin is a good ally name. We set a rhythm. I pulled walk-ups from the ramp, guided tourists with faces like open windows to tea, hustled a senior with purple nails toward a chair that had the knowing air of furniture that's earned its keep. He counted breaths and wrote names and handed a husband a job that wasn't fake. Watch for 5 inhales that don't pull the ribs in. Write it here. The man straightened like he'd been enlisted. You sure you're good? Evan asked again when I passed him a paper cup I hadn't realized I'd filled for him. I keep being, I said. You? Me too. Also, I haven't peed since noon. Is that useful information? Only if we're doing a skills exchange, I said, which is how my mouth flirts when my brain has a rope in one hand and a wind warning in the other. The next gust hit like a door someone meant to knock on and decided to open instead. The anemometer ticked 58 and then tried on 60 like a tie. The mate came over the channel. Sam, we're loading chocks on the sterns and standing by. Ops says we're cancelled through 2100. Cancelled is a word that saves lives and breaks plans. The room knew both. Sam, Evan again, but faster now. We've got a family with a stroller caught on the windward side of slip 1. Security is en route, but that gust is hunting hats. Can you 2-person shepherd them to door A without losing anyone to the sound? On it, I said, because I have an ego and a resume and the sound loves men who think they're taller than they are. We went out together, which is not something policy asked for, and yet the exact thing policy would write if it understood wind. He took the high side, wind shoulder. I took low, and we crab-walked down the pier like we were teaching friction to teenagers. The stroller wanted to fly. The baby inside looked like wisdom in a hood. The mother had jawline courage and shoe choices she regretted. The father carried bags he thought were lighter. Look at me, Evan told the baby in a tone that could instruct air. Everybody gets inside, then we blame me. The baby obeyed. So did the wind for 3 seconds, which is a kind of miracle I'll put in a pocket for later. Back under door A, the room replanted itself. The battery table hummed like progress. Insulin coolers wore tape labels with last names like Metals, Basu, Nguyen, Sandoval. A kid with a ukulele the size of his bravery tried a G chord and got D, and no one corrected him. Someone put out a plate of orange slices. Jules showed up with a look that said he wouldn't mind a tea if it fell into his hand. It fell. Public health to marine ops. Reports of downed line on Yesler near the overpass. City light is en route. Do not re-energize the passenger walkway heaters until line crew clears, another voice said. Not Evans, but in his lane of competence. The room looked at the walkway as though it could hear. The heater made a little tick like wires trying to remember manners. Deny re-energize, Evan told the room like he was rewriting the weather. Blankets always beat amps when water is in the sentence. But here, don't miss this. I realized I wasn't watching him like I watch a pretty man in a bar. I was watching like crew watches crew. For tells, for wobble, for cracks that need hands not advice. And I saw it. One beat where he blinked longer than a blink and the tendons in his hand did a little ballet called I'm tired, but we're not done. You okay? I asked, and I meant it with tools behind the words. I keep being, he said, and then added, softer, don't leave. He didn't mean the room. He meant the channel we'd built with do-nots and thank yous and 2 sips then talk. I'm not going anywhere, I said, like a man who knew the tide tables and ignored them. And then the water decided to show off. A wave train slid under the transfer span wrong, the way they do when wind and tide are in therapy. The span banged the rub rails like someone trying to be let in. Security yelled something I didn't catch over a gust. Jules tapped his watch in a way that means, if you were going to go look, now. Evan, I said into the mic, I need 60 seconds on deck. Go, bring yourself back. I'll hold door A, he answered. And I didn't realize I'd been waiting to hear someone say it exactly like that. On deck, the wind had put on shoulder pads. The stern line moaned in baritone. A plastic cooler lid broke rank and scudded toward the edge like a UFO with poor impulse control. I grabbed it, swore at it politely, and bunged it to a pipe where it could contemplate life choices. A tourist leaned too far, and I used my teacher voice. Sir, do not take selfies in the wind lane. If you want a story, I'll give you one from inside. He obeyed with dignity, which I respected. Back in the hall, a small dog in a canvas bag with Pico, good boy sharpied on the side, licked my knuckles like contract law. The canvas was damp with sound. The dog had more faith in us than air. The owner, thin silver hair, cracked knuckles, said, He likes you. We share a union, I said. Short hair, long nights, snacks. Sam, Evan called softly from 2 chairs away where he'd knelt next to a boy whose breath had turned high and tight. Count for me, in 2, 3, out. His eyes flicked to me, and that's how I learned he trusts me for the cheap math that keeps people alive. We counted. We coached. The nebulizer misted like a spell. The boy went from plum to strawberry. The mother laughed once, the sound people make when fear takes a back seat and sulks. The storm swung and then sat. The anemometer apologized its way back to 30. The PA upstream announced suspensions with a voice like regret. People settled into the room's rules. Charging came back to full, and the kid in the bull's hat started reading out percentages like we were voting on breath. Patel, 64, Sandoval, 91, Kevin, the inhaler, 100%. We clapped because that is a language. Somewhere around 2240, when time had been weird for long enough to normalize, Seattle OEM posted a tweet with a wind map that looked like veins. The caption read, We're here until the colors calm. I pictured the person who wrote it and decided they were someone I could get coffee with. And then I realized I wanted to do that with Evan, not the anonymous city. We finally got quiet the way rooms do after effort, when the people in them decide to stop apologizing for being tired. I stood under the gate C awning, rain turning from anger to confetti, and he came to stand beside me with exact distance like we'd signed a memo about it. We held it, he said. It held us, I said. He smiled, small, like maybe compliments belong in smaller font. Then he did the thing that I had thought was reserved for movies and midnights and doorways with better lighting than ours. He leaned his forehead to mine for 1 beat. PG-13, consent-sized, a prayer that didn't ask for anything it didn't already have. A security camera above door A pivoted with the wide curiosity of a well-trained cat, and then chose to be polite. We stepped apart because a volunteer shouted, Evan, in the tone of clipboards that have been waiting too long. Timing is a show-off. You'd think that was the last cliff. Storms like Codas, though. Ops to terminal. Pedestrian bridge heater on walkway 3 wants to wake up. City light calling it clear. Confirm? The walkway had drip lines that were now dry. The crew had salted until the salt asked for a union card. The puddles had gone into witness protection. I walked the span, felt the rubber under my boots, listened for the hiss that says electricity is pretending to be steam. Evan, I said, because I liked making his name the first thing in a sentence when decisions were in it. I'll take half on, watch for 10, then full if nobody is practicing ice. Affirmed, he said, which is a word you should only use when it's worth the syllables. We did half, we watched. We did full. No one fell in love with gravity by mistake. The room accepted the change like a cat who has decided to tolerate your existence. A woman with a viola case asked me where to tip. I pointed at the charging table and said, Tell him his percentages sound like music. She did. He blushed. At 23:30, the boats stopped pretending they'd leave. Ops called final suspensions. The terminal committed to being a hotel. People made nests with coats and self-respect. Someone busted out cards. Someone else turned a child's stroller into a throne with a blanket and a story. Evan taped a sign to door A that said, Small, honest, enough. He underlined enough like a man who's learned how to stop when stop is the win. You should eat, he told me, but in a voice that really meant stay. And he pulled a granola bar from somewhere you're not supposed to keep food if you follow rules. I took half and let my fingers touch his fingers for an extra beat, like we were checking if heat still moves that way. It does. Somewhere in the early morning hours, OWS.Ferries posted the recap. Wind graphs, suspension times, gratitude to crew and passengers who chose patience. The last slide was a grainy still from the Door A camera. 2 figures under the awning, one in high-vis with a radio, one in a soft shell with a badge, foreheads inclined for exactly 1 heartbeat. The caption read, "We'll keep the door. You keep each other." He texted it to me. How did he get my number? With dinner? And then always 3 dots later, like weather had given permission. We ate noodles at a place on Yesler that keeps steam on the windows like a hobby. He told me about deployments where air was the villain and families needed labels more than they needed advice. I told him about lines that sing and bits that tell you when they're thinking of quitting. He told me his abuela said no like a promise. I told him my ama kept a thermos in the coat closet for guests and emergencies, and taught me that the difference between the two is mostly timing. We didn't pick a schedule. We made a rule. When NWS paints the polygon, he texts here. When Ops says high wind watch, I text me too. He keeps a spare spacer in the lost and found and writes for the kid named Kevin on it to make the universe behave. I keep a Sharpie in his badge pouch because names are rope when the room tries to drift. He tells me do not like a blessing. I tell him bring them to gate C like a song. Weeks did their thing where they stack and you only notice when they lean. We practiced in smaller storms, a gust that slapped the walkway like an unruly cousin, a tourist whose wheelie bag thought it was a sled, a fisherman who swore he could time the swell until the swell asked for evidence. We practiced in sideways storms, a brief outage when a transformer thought it was July, a line that decided to untwist itself because it forgot teamwork. Each time I heard Sam do not, over the radio, my chest did the seatbelt thing, and my hands did the work thing, and the room did the room thing. Each time I said Evan into a sentence that had decision in it, we got lucky faster. On a quiet Tuesday that arrived as a gift instead of a test, he met me under the ferry clock and we watched Bremerton leave like a promise. The water remembered how to be flat for a minute. A seaplane wrote something cursive across the sky and no one tried to read it out loud. He wore a beanie he didn't need, and I touched the rim like I owned it and he let me like I'd paid the fee. "You okay?" I asked, because that's how you keep doors open. "I keep being," he said, "and I keep choosing." He leaned in and gave me the 1 beat we practice, forehead to forehead. Without cameras this time, without storms, with only the hum of a city we've decided to love by working for it. Sometimes the safest place in Seattle isn't behind a storm gate or under a pier with the good bolts. Sometimes it's the inch between 2 foreheads under a terminal awning while the sound remembers that it can listen. Sometimes it's a voice on Channel 3 that says your name like a cleat and the 2 words that save more nights than heroics. Do not. When the radar colors get thick and the flag on the harbor goes rigid and pigeons give up on their meetings, I check the lines, I count faces, I answer the mic. "I'm here," I tell him. "Me too," he says. And Gate C remembers it's a doctrine, and Door A remembers it's a definition, and the boats remember we're lucky enough to call them work. The wind will return. It always does. The sound will hunch its shoulders and try out its anger and then apologize. Someone will forget about the bight. Someone will argue with the walkway. Someone will name their inhaler something brave. We'll cone a corridor, we'll bridge a circuit, we'll count a breath, we'll say a name. We'll take our 1 beat under a camera that chooses to be kind, and we'll call it what it is. Small. Honest. Enough.